All right, it's getting that time. It's getting to be that time of year, guys, where we need to start pulling our data together. We need to start looking to see what happened with this action plan that we put together last August. Maybe this is December, maybe it's in May. For the purposes this year, obviously we're doing this in the spring, but you can do this every semester, and you can go from there. You want to pull out your data, pull it out, and then let's start looking at building this improvement plan. This plan that is going to deal with the process of how you've created everything, and you've looked over all of your students' information. How did you build from that action plan? Why did you pull the data that you had? Was that data directly what you said you were doing? I think, as we talked about, you want to make sure that you are as specific as possible in your action plans on exactly what you're going to be using as far as instruments and as far as the courses you're going to use them for, so that when you go to this step, you know exactly what you're pulling. You're not pulling it out of your hat. You've pulled it from your action plan. And we can show a direct correlation between what we did last year, what we're doing this year, and base what we did this year possibly on what we're going to do in next year's work. And what are we doing? We're showing continuous improvement, continuous change to build that improvement. So let's move on to take a look at the steps of the improvement plan. Next up, let's talk about how we're going to actually build that improvement narrative. This is going to be the report, your annual report. And I'm seeing what's been in LARS in the past for you guys. We're talking, some people have had as many as 20 to 25 pages of reporting, and they've had to go in and there are long paragraphs. You have to go in and you have to insert information. It seems so tedious and so long. And to be quite honest with you, my first month at the university, I spent time, I really stayed. It was hard to stay awake with some of these things. Not that your reporting wasn't interesting, it's just in the way, the tediousness of it, it really was hard to keep an attention span, even for me. And I look at these things every day. So that was the first thing we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure, we want to make something effective that doesn't take a lot of your time, but at the same time gives you concrete information that you can move forward with. In building the narrative, there are 4 steps. There's the process, positives that you've seen from that process, the challenges that have come out of that process, and in the end, the action plan that we're going to build stronger outcomes through the next process. The next process, we'll talk about these areas and how this action that we took to improve upon this previous year's process. First of all, when talking about the process, we're talking about what's been done to develop the learning outcomes, to make the changes and achieve meaningful improvements. You've already got the outcomes in place. You don't even have to talk. Let's say you have 6 outcomes. We're not talking about all 6 outcomes in this narrative. Let's look at 1 to 2 a year, or 3. I mean, you can look at all 6. Some people choose to look at all 6 if that's your case, but that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what the university is looking for. We're looking for ways that we're improving our program. And if it means you're doing a couple of these a year, outcomes a year, as long as you explain your process, we're looking at these 2 outcomes and the data that comes from them, and we'll be looking at other outcomes in the future. As long as you explain that, that's all we need. And then we move forward with those 2 outcomes in the process. Building the narrative in the positives, as far as positives go. What were good things that came out of the improvement process based on the results of the data that came out of your process? So, of course, we've already, at this point, we've built our outcomes. We have measures. The positives are talking about what came from those measures. And you're going to talk about the good things. You know, this is what really, this was promising. And this part of the data was promising. This is what we're going to continue to do this because it looks like it's something that our students are improving. Students seem to like what's going on. And based on this data, we think we're on the right track in this area. We're going to talk about challenges. What things didn't work as expected? Everything doesn't have to work, and that's okay if it doesn't. But we want to record that. If it's not always working and it's not always cooperative with what we're trying to do, then that's all right. That's how we make decisions on some of the actions and the changes we want to make in the years ahead. And finally, as far as the action plan for the next year, so when we talk about an action plan, this action plan goes into next year. So immediately after you write this action plan out, you'll take a look at this moving into the next year and the next fall. Our improvements plans are going to be due. They're always going to be due in August, so that in September, you're starting a new year. You're not looking back at last year. In years past, you've had October and November dates. You're always looking a year behind, so it makes it even more confusing. We're going to get done in August, and really, I'm going to suggest as it gets easier, and this will get easy for you as you're doing it, I'm going to suggest that you go ahead and knock it out in May. When you look at your data in May, you can put this together and have it, you'll be done with it. By the time you go out for the summer, this is one less thing you've got to worry about. The more you get done, the earlier, and you move into the fall, what you're doing, you're taking your action plan that you set up based on the last year's improvement narrative. That action plan, you're going to use that action plan to build and pick up the data for the coming year. Offering actions and details. You're going to talk about training that you might want to add, or readings. Talk about instruments that you might want to add to help measure some of these things. And maybe even added treatments from previous year's actions to see how they shake out between freshman, sophomore, and junior and senior work, or how they shake out between a freshman and a senior. Any kind of way you want to cut this. The next year, with the next year, based on that action plan, process, positives, and challenges, it's all going to be information that are going to come from that previous action plan. So your process, when you start to write your report, you go back and look at last year's action improvement narrative, look at the action plan that you had. That's where you start from, and you've been working with that. Makes it easier. You work with that during the year, during your semesters, at the end of your spring and fall semester, fall and spring semesters, what have you. You look at those and you build your process, your challenges and your positives. You build that off of that data from the previous action plan. It makes it very easy to continue moving year to year. And so there's less likelihood that when a new person comes to take your spot, they're going to be able to see right where you picked up. It's going to be very easy to explain to them even if you're no longer there, the chair or whoever's handling an assessment will be able to tell them exactly what needs to be done based on that action plan. This is what we're doing. This is how you're going to record this data. And as far as that next year's action plan, at this point, you've made changes to strengthen the previous year's results. And from these changes in the next action plan or in that next narrative, you're going to say, okay, what was the improvement? Did it improve from the year before? That's the measure. That's the improvement we're looking at. And from that, you're either going to say it succeeded, improved to the point that we wanted to improve, or we want to make another change or another treatment to see if we can build it and make it a little bit stronger for the coming year. I would say 2 to 3 years minimum for each of your outcomes when you're working on things like that. 2 to 3 years worth of data, looking at this a couple of times, and then maybe you move on to the next outcome. Again, you make clear in your process exactly what you're doing, why you're not looking at it doesn't have to be a long thing. You say, I'm not looking at the other 4. I'm looking at these 2 narratives or these 2 outcomes. I'm not looking at the other 4 right now. I'll look at 2 more in the coming years, maybe in year 4, year 5, what have you. As long as you write down what's going on, that's all we need to know. This is your improvement. This is your assessment. It's not everybody else's. It's your program trying to build. And then, of course, did you recognize the improvements? And whether or not, as I said, whether or not you want to make these additional changes. This is, and you can probably look at this. I can send you, all you have to do, I'll leave my number on here. later. I can send you a copy of this, but this is what, this is as large as a narrative has to be. Between one to 2 pages. It could be, now I've seen people that have given me 3 and 4 pages, and that's their prerogative. But I'm not looking for, this is not rocket science. I'm not looking for a long period of time. No more 20-page reports. It's not necessary. 1.5 pages, you can build in, and you can see, you can break it down and give us the information and basically exactly what you're doing. In this one, they built an action plan for the next year, and they even put down the specific assignments that they were going to use to improve that action plan. What assignments they were going to use the next year, so that the next year when they come back, they can go back and look at the various assignments they said they were going to use and build their data off of those assignments. Finally, I've got these references to some of the quotes. If any of you want to learn more about some of these techniques, some of these ideas, I have a library in my office that is always available. I will check this book. I'll check that book out to you. Anybody can read whatever they might want without having to purchase it. I've got it available for you to use. And this is our island. This isn't just your island. I'm not setting you out on an island so that you have to do all of this by yourself. Everything that I'm talking about in this narrative, I'm fully able to come and help you with that. I'll be at your door whenever you want me to. Obviously, in the pandemic, it's very, very difficult to do that. Once the pandemic's over, expect to see me more and more walking the halls. Not because I want to be a menace, because I'm here to help you. I'm a resource. I'm not here to make sure you do your homework. I'm here as a resource to help you make it easier, so that we have to do this. Let's make it meaningful to each other, make it meaningful for our programs, do the best we can with it, and get it out of our hair as quick as possible. And I'm here to help you do all of that. You can call me anytime. I've got my phone number and my email address. Thanks very much for everything you do, and let's move forward together.